life in a dream, like thoughts become a river stream. Yet may the tide ever change, flowing like time to the path yours to claim.
Fire Emblem. I'm disappointed in you, Sumeragi. That wasn't even my best trap.
So obtain the fate you sow.
You poor thing. You are my child now.
General, you face the High Prince of Hoshido, Ryoma. I challenge you to single combat. I will accept your challenge, High Prince.
This video will contain story spoilers for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Awakening, and the beginning of Fire Emblem Fates. You have been warned. Fire Emblem is a series that is very important to me. I remember the first time I caught wind of the series. It was like most people, by playing Smash Bros. And seeing two characters in Melee I hadn't recognized, Marth and Roy. Now, I had known that there did exist a few games on the Game Boy Advance that came over here, but the Game Boy Advance was largely a Pokemon machine for me at this point, so I didn't have any of them. This would go on till about 2008 or so, when Super Smash Bros. Brawl launched on the Nintendo Wii right at the start of the year. My cousin, younger brother, and I were so excited to try out all the new characters when we saw another character from this series that joined the fray, Ike. I had heard from him as he had rented one of the Fire Emblem games from our local Game Crazy, and sheesh, do you remember Game Crazy? For those uninitiated, they were these little stores that acted like tumors off of our Hollywood video, kind of like a ye old Blockbuster. I still pass by that old store every so often, and I see it has been turned into a mattress store. Talk about depressing. Anyway, my cousin Luke tells me he rented this game where Nintendo characters actually died and there was actually blood, and listen, I was 12 when I heard these facts and was a Nintendo head from all my gaming years up to this point. I'd play Pokemon and Mario and Smash Bros, which did get competitive, but it was fake violence, you know? I knew more mature games were out there, but they didn't interest me as much. So to see characters that looked like this go through more mature situations, I gotta say, I was intrigued. Now, for those of you who may question the authenticity of the story or any statements specifically made, mainly about the blood part, I'm sure he was talking about this scene from Path of Radiance on the GameCube, as that was the one he rented at the time. Those who know. Anyway, it was at this point that I discovered emulation, and specifically Game Boy Advance emulation. Through this, I set out to play Fire Emblem 8, The Sacred Stones, using Visual Boy Advance. This was the beginning of my time online, as before this point, the only thing I really used the computer for was to browse Cerebi looking for new Pokemon updates, or to stare at the Brawl Dojo waiting for new fighters to be announced. Fire Emblem was the first game that I seriously played on the PC, and it's also the first game I ever made a YouTube video about, and did a Let's Play for. On my original channel, the very first channel I made on this site, I uploaded a 30-part series going through a chunk of the game's story. I never finished this Let's Play, but I did finish the game itself off camera. Now, by Let's Play, I really mean just game playthrough, as I didn't have a functioning microphone to use, and the only screen recording software I had was Visual Boy Advance's built-in recorder. This is infamously bad for desyncing audio from video, and I remember using Windows Movie Maker until I grew into using my first ever video editing software proper, Camtasia. And man, Camtasia is nostalgic as hell for me, and I owe a lot to its relatively simple user interface to hook me into video editing. Now, 14 years later, I am still using Premiere Pro because I am chained to Adobe software. After this, I would go on to play Fire Emblem 6 and 7, the two other Game Boy Advance releases, including the game that never made it out of Japan. I learned how to English patch a game for the first time because of the series. I then went on to pick up Path of Radiance on the GameCube, otherwise known as the first game with Ike in it, and then would borrow my cousin Luke's copy of Radiant Dawn on the Wii, the game's sequel, and my personal favorite Fire Emblem title. And so it would go on that whenever a new Fire Emblem game came out, I would be looking out for it, and would add it to my collection. Then came Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, a remake of the very first Fire Emblem game on the Nintendo DS. This was the first game to star Marth, otherwise known as the guy from Smash Bros., and while it's not my favorite title by far, it's still incredibly nostalgic to me, and I still have vivid memories recording Wi-Fi battles on it on that original YouTube channel. Shitty camera quality and all. Next came another Japanese-only release with New Mystery of the Emblem, Heroes of Light and Shadow. This was a remake of Fire Emblem 3, the direct sequel to Fire Emblem 1, and if that's confusing to you, there are better places to explain it. But anyway, this game also featured Marth, and I played this game solely through on an emulator, harkening back to the old days of playing the Game Boy Advance games on one, and I remember really enjoying it. Especially the battle theme for one of the final battles, Dark Harden. So good. Then came the big one. This is the game that brought a lot of new fans into the fandom. Fire Emblem Awakening was set to come out in 2013 for Nintendo 3DS, and this was the time that I could tell Fire Emblem was getting big. It got an official demo on the 3DS's eShop and everything, and it was getting even more characters in Smash Bros. To the internet's chagrin. I liked it, by the way. Now, this demo, you could play the prologue in the first chapter, and I remember I played this demo as much as I possibly could as soon as it came out. I was absorbed in the create a character feature, and I wished so dearly for a protagonist who wielded both spells and swords for the longest time, and then this game blew up. The developers, Intelligent Systems, have stated that Fire Emblem Awakening was their breaking point. This game was going to be their send-off to the series because historically sales weren't always the greatest. And oh boy, sometimes that was for the dumbest reasons. They looked back through the series' history and decided to take elements from it that people clung most to, and they wanted to revitalize it. At the time, there was a very large outcry for the fourth Fire Emblem title, Saisen no Kaiku, or known in the West as Genealogy of the Holy War. Even now to this day, this game has its very, very vocal fan base, and I'm one of them after having since played it. This game was special to a lot of fans, as it was much grander in scale than many Fire Emblems before, and even some after it, featuring essentially two halves of a story to play through over generations, as the back half of the game has you playing as the direct descendants of the characters in the first half. and you have the ability to influence the genealogy based on your actions in the game. This marriage and pairing up system was huge for the game's cult status, and Intelligent Systems knew that they wanted to follow up on this idea, and if there was any time to do it, it would be an Awakening. And it was a huge success. It became the best-selling game in the series, and is loved and adored by many, many fans. You may think that I hate what Awakening did to the series, as many of its more tropey natures and moments stemmed from this game, and you'd be wrong. I admit Awakening has a bit of what we call a sagging middle in the writing world, but on a whole, I adore this game. The music, the gameplay, and the absolute replayability in creating new pairs of characters to foster different treats for the children. See, one thing that's important about the whole children aspect is how they came to be. In Genealogy of the Holy War, half of the game takes place during the point of view of Sigurd, and then shifts into a time skip after certain steamy events, where the point of view shifts to his son Seliph. In Awakening, the children units are actually from an alternate future, where the villain of the game, Grima, was able to rise to power once again. The children travel back to the past to prevent the future they experienced from happening, and fight alongside their parents, before they became their parents. It's time travel, yeah, but I think it's effective, and it leads to some really unique story moments, and brings us some cool characters like Lucina. With one of my new favorite Fire Emblem titles under my belt, what was to come next? My worst fucking nightmare. So, long introductions are important, I think, when discussing the context behind a work of art. And that context is very important when discussing the feelings that work of art may have on a viewer, a player, a reader, so on and so forth. Some may not care about the context, but since this is my opinion and my feelings on Fire Emblem Fates as a whole, I think it's important to bring forward this context because I fully expect there to be contention with points of this video, and I openly accept that. I'm not making this video in this series to tell you that you need to agree with me, or that you need to boycott this game, especially since that's no longer going to be reasonable anyway, since the 3DS eShop's going down under. No. I'm making this video because I felt the urge to make this video since 2015, when this game came out. I've been wanting to make this series for near 7 years, and each time I sat down to plan it, or script it, or even gather footage, I got too emotional. I got too angry. I got too disappointed. Too frustrated. It became too much. This game had filled me with so many emotions, and not all of them were bad, but the most poignant ones were. And it felt like it would become an unlistenable tirade that not even I would enjoy getting out. So, what did inspire me to make this now? Why is now the right time for this video series? Well, a few reasons. First, we have the announcement of Fire Emblem Engage coming out soon as of this writing. This game is a few months away, and it's rumored heavily to be made to celebrate Fire Emblem's 30th anniversary. Now, that intention may have been so, but it seems clear it was pushed back to polish up, so the NES translation and Three Hopes could be that for the series. But anyway, the game looks exciting. It's bringing past lords into the spotlight, and honestly, Fire Emblem hasn't been in such a bright spot in a very long time. What once was a series that could barely release games over here to the West, and was in peril of being cancelled for good, is now Nintendo's flagship SRPG studio. And Intelligent Systems, the development studio responsible for one of my favorite games of all time, in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. I promise a video on this is coming eventually, it just keeps coming back up in these videos as well. But as well as Fire Emblem definitely had a rough patch during the 3DS and Wii U days, because as much as I feel for Fire Emblem Fates, I was feeling just as disappointed and angry at Paper Mario Sticker Star. Man, it was a bad time being an Intelligent Systems fan during this time, but it was super disappointing, and Intelligent Systems went back to back to back with this. I've thought about doing a video on Sticker Star, but the video that was the final nail in the coffin for this series idea, and my final reason for why I want to do this video now, is Chuggy Conroy's most recent video essay, tackling the very idea of tackling Sticker Star. It's a fantastic watch, and is actually the exact formula I was planning on having for this video for the longest time, but seeing this in motion really lit that fire, and here we are. This is going to be a long one, and it's going to be multiple parts, but since we're doing this, we should go over some housekeeping notes so it's clear how it's going to play out. Fire Emblem Fates is not a single game, but instead 3 separate games in total, plus DLC. Or if you want to be real pedantic, it is 2 games with a DLC campaign, and an additional DLC mini-campaign in addition to that. We'll get to that in a bit. Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, and Fire Emblem Fates Revelation are 3 sides to a single story. And while it isn't required you play all 3, you do gain a full understanding of all of the events at play by playing all 3. The 3 share the central character's Corrin, a customizable avatar character similar to Robin from Awakening, and Azura, a mysterious blue-haired songstress who is in a similar position to you in the game, and the remaining cast is filled by members of the nation of Hoshido or the kingdom of Nohr, based on the game you purchase. Revelation acts as a bit of a middle-of-the-road path where you don't align yourself with either nation, but instead make enemies of both sides. But as you play along, you slowly amass a cast that is a mix of both sides. For the purposes of this video, we will be covering the events of the very beginning of the game right up until the split in the road happens, and then we will cover Birthright, and then Conquest, and then finally Revelations in their own separate videos, alongside with the remainder of the DLC. And by covering, that means we have a few categories. First is going to be gameplay and music. I'll cover these in more detail as we go along through the actual games, but first, before that, I will generally go over my thoughts on each, as they are where most of the positives are going to lie. After that, we'll dig into the chapter-by-chapter synopsis, where we'll cover the characters that are introduced to us, as well as the story that plays out. Now, I'm a data guy, but I'm also a storyteller of my own. So in these character bios, I'm going to be covering them as a character in the story, my thoughts on them, anything I feel like should be said, but also as a gameplay unit. I've played enough Fire Emblem in my time to get a handle on which characters are good and which ones are stinkers. Now, a lot of my feelings are influenced by their role and actions in the story, as I am a writing guy, but I just want to make it clear that I'm taking as much as I can into account. And for the story, well, it's pretty simple. We'll go chapter by chapter, discussing the events that play out, and discuss how they fit into the larger chunk of the story when needed. Next, there is one important thing I should mention. In Fire Emblem Fates, the first 6 chapters are the exact same no matter which path you choose. You spend the first 3 in the Kingdom of Nohr, and then the next 3 in the Kingdom of Hoshido. So you get some time with each side before you make your decision. It is from that decision point in Chapter 6 that we will begin the next part in Birthright, and the story is going to branch out, so this coverage will do the same. For organizational purposes, we'll follow the route I mentioned previously. Birthright, Conquest, then Revelation. Alright, with that said, I think we're finally ready to begin Fire Emblem Fates. It was developed for the Nintendo 3DS and released in June 2015 in Japan, and nearly a year later in February 2016 in North America, and even later that year in May for Europe and Australia. But in essence, it is more detailed than that, as Birthright and Conquest released at those times, but Revelation came after in every territory, being July 2015 for Japan, March in North America, and June in Europe and Australia. The game had 2 directors, Kuhei Maeda and Genki Yokota. Apologies for any mispronunciations, there's going to be a lot of Japanese names moving forward. Kuhei is the director from Intelligent Systems, who had been a scenario writer on the Fire Emblem series since Fire Emblem 6, The Binding Blade, the one with Roy in it that never came out to the West. And he eventually became the director of the series during New Mystery of the Emblem, and continued on to direct Awakening, Fates, and to this day is the game director for Fire Emblem Heroes, the Fire Emblem gacha game for mobile devices. Genki Yokota is the director who is representative at Nintendo, and he is known to direct some of Nintendo's second-party partnerships, such as Fossil Fighters, Xenoblade Chronicles, Fire Emblem Awakening, and of course Fire Emblem Fates. He would also go on to direct all future Fire Emblem and Xenoblade titles, as well as work on Bayonetta 3 as a director. funnily enough, his work on directing this game would actually be split in tandem with his work on directing Xenoblade Chronicles X, alongside Tetsuya Takahashi. How my hyperfixations like to cross the beams. So, we have a historied pair here with a lot of experience under their belts. Let's take a look at some of their other talent behind this game. The art of Fire Emblem Fates was brought to us by Toshiyuki Kusikahara and Yusuke Kozaki. Folks tend to point just to Kozaki's designs when talking about this era of Fire Emblem, but in truth, Kusikahara was the first assigned to work on the series as the art director of Fire Emblem Awakening. So it was his direction and assistance that brought Kozaki along. And I have to say, their work on Awakening and Fates and beyond is staggeringly good. I love the designs of these games, and they are some of the most iconic and most Fire Emblem that I can say. This is also totally not because I'm biased, since Yusuke Kozaki also did the character design for Aegeon and Agate from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and the whole cast from I the Somnium Files and its sequel, The Nirvana Initiative. But anyway, their work was definitely not unnoticed, as after Fates, Yoshiyuki Kusikahara would go on to contribute various illustrations for the Japanese exclusive Fire Emblem trading card game, Fire Emblem Cypher. Yes, this is real, you should look it up, the art is phenomenal. An illustrator and special thanks given in Fire Emblem Heroes, and finally becoming a director and lyrics writer for Fire Emblem Shadows of Valentia and Three Houses. Yusuke Kozaki, on the other hand, has a lot of history both in manga art and character design. If you're a fan of No More Heroes, then his art design needs no introduction. But a fun fact is, he also went on to design the original designs for the team leaders and Professor Willow for Pokemon Go. He has done artwork for Fire Emblem Heroes since, but after Fire Emblem Fates, his work on the main series of Fire Emblem has completed. But I definitely don't think it was due to any negative feelings toward his work. Again, by myriad of issues with these games, the art is not one of them. They are some of the best looking games on the console. Next up is going to be the writing staff. And this is where the largest bulk of my complaints are going to stem from as we go into the meat and potatoes of it. But I want to stress that I am offering my criticism on the product they assisted on creating, nothing further. I know most people won't take that the wrong way, but I find it best to be thorough and make it clear that just because I dislike a story they have written does not mean they deserve any sort of backlash or punishment or anything. Now, since this part is going to feature the largest in the video, I'm going to go a bit deeper into the context of why the game is the way that it is. With that said, the three writers this project had, mainly and publicly credited, were Shin Kobayashi, Yukinori Kitajima, and Nami Komuro. Now, the team was trying to learn from feedback they'd received on Awakening, as they were shocked to be hearing that a sequel was greenlit, as they'd put everything they had into making Awakening, thinking it was going to be the last game in the series. One of the complaints from critics and old fans was that the story of Awakening was too simple. I mean, people can have their opinions, but I would have worded it the way I did before, a sagging middle. Anyway, they wanted to have a much greater focus on the story this time around, and so they started a brainstorm. Our two directors would fashion a story idea until the idea came to one of the producers, Hitoshi Yamagami. He remembered back during Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, he's talking about the NES original, but I'll use information from the DS remake since it applies and visually looks better, that there is a point in the game's story where Marth would have to make a decision to save one of two units. This would be Samson the hero, or Aaron the paladin. Now, neither of these characters were especially good, but typically players chose which items they wanted more to take for their army. And Yamagami thought back to this choice and wondered, what if we made a story based around a choice like this, and what if that choice mattered? What if? So, that became the core concept that they would start to plan around. And in Japanese, that what if thought stuck as they would call the game Fire Emblem If, to symbolize the amount of choice and freedom you'd have. Now, with this thought, they decided they wanted to make a plan for a story where you chose not to choose. A third path, as it were. And then suddenly, the ballooning of the story began, and they realized they didn't have the manpower to write the story for effectively 3 games in-house. So, this is where our crew of extra writers came in. Nami Komura was the easiest of the bunch to find, as she was a scenario writer on Fire Emblem Awakening, so it only made sense to bring her on for the main project. But the studio needed outside support, and they needed it fast. After looking through a list of video game writers they had available on call for assistance, Kohei Maeda then made the decision to reach out to Shin Kobayashi, a legendary manga author, and whose work also extended to television shows in Japan. They really wanted his assistance on the matter, but he initially declined, saying he was too busy with his current workload. This wasn't good enough for Maeda, though. He offered to give Kobayashi a copy of Fire Emblem Awakening to play, which he did so happily with his daughter. Man, real quick. I hear about these kinds of stories all the time from Japanese creators, and I'm just so jealous folks have that kind of relationship with their parents to play full-ass SRPGs with them. Anyway, after completing the game, Kobayashi turned around on the idea and decided to accept, saying he'd write a 10-page draft for each game that the main staff could work off of to expand. However, after finishing his drafts, he felt that they became too attached to his characters he created, and he decided they deserved more than 10 pages. So, he did the normal thing that anybody does and expanded the story prompt for Birthright into a 500-page script. After delivering this to the team at Intelligent Systems, this madman continued and made similar length summaries for the Conquest and Revelation routes. This madman wrote about 1,500 pages, and I struggle some days to get 3 down. I'm not jealous, I swear. Now, a part of the reason behind his determination was his desire to surpass his daughter's expectations for the next Fire Emblem title, as he knew that she was now a fan due to their playthrough of Awakening together. Kobayashi had enough content to fill 2 full novels when he was done, and he contributed a lot to the character work for the Nohrian and Hoshido nobles, of which we'll get to in due course. After he completed his work on the storylines, he handed off the summaries, and then the other 2 writers began their work. We spoke about Nami briefly before. She was one of those who had been the principal writer of all 3 story routes, and to assist her was Yukinori Kitajima, a writer associated with the Senran Kagura series, and other staff from his scriptwriting company, Synthes, wrote the support conversations for Birthright and Conquest, and Kitajima himself wrote the storyline for the Revelation Path. And oh boy, do I have some words for you, Mr. Kitajima. Anyway, joking aside. Next up, and last for our history lesson here, is music, as the game's soundtrack here, like its visuals, are stunning. The soundtrack is a collaboration of multiple composers, Hiroki Morishita and Rei Kondo, who both worked on Awakening's soundtrack Return, while other composers such as Masato Koda, who had previously composed for Monster Hunter, as well as Takeru Kanazaki of WarioWare fame, as well as Yasuhisa Baba of Intelligent Systems, supervising all this talent, was longtime composer of the series Yuka Suiyoko. And by long time, I mean long time. She composed for the series since the very beginning, and even composed for the Paper Mario series. I'm gonna make a note about this when we talk about a song later on. The music in this game is phenomenal. The music is dynamic, and shifts between quiet melodies and large, thunderous battle themes depending if you're in battle or not. And I have to give special mention to the title track of this game, Lost in Thoughts All Alone. It's a really good song, and I have to give special attention also to the final boss variation of it, called End of All and its many variations. We'll listen to some now. Now, I know this is the final boss theme, but I'm going to be saving the other special variation of this song for later, so I don't feel bad about bringing this version up now. It's so good. Anyway, this game's soundtrack kicks ass. The art is really good. The character designs are really definitive and iconic, and we have a lot of writing talent, plus a huge pedigree and passion absolutely oozing from every orifice of this project. So much so that there were 2 full novels written for this game's story. How could this go wrong? It went wrong. So, we begin with a strange blue-haired girl singing the central theme of the game before diving deep underwater, and before we can begin to process these events, we're thrust into the gales of battle between 2 warring kingdoms, the eastern kingdom of Hoshido and the western kingdom of Nohr. These 2 kingdoms exist on the continent well, we never get a name of a unified continent, and fan theory has suggested that they comprise 2 separate continents, named Hoshido and Nohr, and oh man, we're starting off with this, aren't we? Anyway, I did want to mention I really like this part here where the 2 princes of the opposing kingdoms stand off in battle, and especially this moment where their swords clash as it goes against in slow motion. Just waiting for that connection is super satisfying, and every time that I see this, the dopamine receptors fire off in my brain. We're introduced to both sides of the war very briefly as our main character, Corn, is helping out on the front lines as he is assisted by a few other of the Hoshidan royal family. Now, we're going to get into the family members specifically in a little bit because this prologue here is just a sneak peek of things to come, so we don't need to fret about the specifics so soon. We will go over Corn though!
Corn!
So, Corn here is... well, there's something. I'm not gonna mince words here. They're my least favorite Fire Emblem protagonist. In short, they are whiny, and in the Conquest games, their character makes a lot of ridiculous decisions to try to bend this piece of cardboard into making that game's plot make even the slightest bit of sense. And... man... they are one of the largest and deep-rooted problems that permeates this game is that every character, nearly every character, worships Corn as if the ground would not exist without them stepping foot on it first. And if Corn were a good character, I'd be all fine with joining that crowd. I mean, I love Robin, and much of the same happens for them, although not as egregious, but it helps when the character is likable, you know? Design-wise, I think they're fine. The options are a little less than fine rather than their default look. I tend to prefer the female Corn's look to the male's. He looks like a bit of a Melvin if you ask me, but the no shoes thing was definitely designed for a certain crowd. We'll be coming back to that later on. Gameplay-wise, Corn's a pretty solid unit. The avatar, like in Awakening, has some modifiability with the Boon and Bane modifiers. You can give a boost to unit growths and their base stats if you know how they'll grow when they level up. Characters have stats sort of like Pokemon do. Their HP, Strength, Magic, Skill, Speed, Luck, Defense, Resistance, and Movement are all stats that can be raised either by level up or by special items. Corn's growth rates are pretty well rounded, showing strong favorings for physical attack and HP alongside speed, meaning they'll be a penchant for using swords and doing a lot of combo attacks to enemies while being able to take hits relatively well, as their defenses aren't too thin. You want this in your Lord in Fire Emblem, and as a Lord gameplay-wise, Corn's not too bad. We've had worse Lords in gameplay. We've had much worse. Their personal skill, Supportive, is very good in helping other units in battle, and the really good skill is Nobility, which gives extra experience earned in battle, and Dragon Fang, which greatly boosts their damage output in battle with a high activation rate. I'll go over their weapon usage later on, as Corn's options aren't immediately available yet. Now, moving back to the battlefield, we meet with a lot of characters who, again, we'll meet much later on, so we'll just very generally go over the differences between the 2 nations that we can see off the bat. Hoshido tends to favor a lot of agile offensive strategies, while Nohr favors bulky defenses to overpower quick offenses. It's evident to see that we'll also double down on this later, but the Kingdom of Hoshido is very much an analog to a mixture of Sengoku and Edo era Japan, whereas Nohr resembles feudal Roman and Greek elements of ancient Europe. Gameplay-wise, this chapter is just a tutorial to teach new folks how to play the game of Fire Emblem, which I'll go over now. Fire Emblem is a strategy RPG, not fully unlike the game of chess, except your individual pieces are characters you control on a grid, who perform in combat to satisfy a number of conditions to clear a map. These can be such as routing the enemies on the map, defending for a certain number of turns, seizing a central location, along some other gameplay mechanics that we'll see later on. Now, one of the numerous differences from this game to chess is that all of your player units will take their turn, and then all of the enemy units will take their turn. It is not a unit-by-unit basis, so be wary that you're going to be facing an onslaught of enemy turns all at once. Characters can die in Fire Emblem, and for a long time this permadeath was one of Fire Emblem's most unique mechanics. However, there are some important distinctions. Characters that are integral to the story's progression, like Corrin in this instance, can't die, as dying would mean the story doesn't happen. So characters with huge import like this will have you end in a game over and restart the chapter if they are to die. However, characters that aren't necessary to the story moving forward, essentially anyone who isn't a Nohrian or Hoshidan royal, is free game, and the challenge comes in completing these maps with trying to keep your units alive as best as possible. Now, this sounds at all stressful to you? Too stressful, in fact? Then there are ways to mitigate this. Ever since New Mystery of the Emblem on the Nintendo DS, a new casual gameplay mode has been established, and you can choose to select before you play your game. This turns off the permadeath functionality, and instead makes it so any units that would die permanently are brought back to your army at the beginning of the next chapter. So you'll still have to finish the fight without that unit that just died, provided they aren't one of the units that nets you a game over, but you'll get them back no sweat if the enemy happen to get an unlucky critical hit against you. Now, if that's still too stressful, there is another tier of mitigation called Phoenix Mode. Phoenix Mode is unique to this game, and like Casual Mode, is an optional feature that you can use that will revive your units the turn after they are killed. This essentially means that the only way you can lose is if one of those story central characters dies, and it does make the difficulty a lot more manageable if strategy games aren't your forte, and you're just interested in experiencing the story. But for this game, oh boy, do I have some bad news for you. Now, with that said, we learn the basics and get a super short introduction to some of the Hoshidan royal family. Again, we'll go over them in more depth in a bit. We do get a short glimpse of gameplay use of the archer Takumi, and I can't wait to praise this boy's gameplay strengths, but another time. Sakura is also here to help heal Corrin's wounds as he fends off the Nohrian soldiers, as it's clear the Nohrians here are invading Hoshidan soil, and Corrin is fighting back against them. Important note to keep in mind for later. We also get to see some of the Nohrian royals appear, and one of the eldest, Camilla, I promise I have a lot to talk about with her later, uses an ability that will foreshadow for much later called the Dragon Vein, causing the water in the moat here to dry up. This is a new gameplay element that will greatly change up the terrain in combat, and we'll be using it a lot moving forward. Anyway, we kill the soldier and end the chapter. Immediately we can see Takumi here has the snark of 1,000 suns, and honestly I enjoy him quite a bit. The family is gathered to the two crown princes fighting in the center of the battlefield, and this comes the scene that everyone who has seen that one Smash Bros. Reveal knows, at least a different form of it. But then suddenly a voice rings out past our vision, telling us, Corrin wakes up to two maids, Flora and Felicia, inside a castle deep within the kingdom of Nohr. Also with him in the room are his retainer, Gunther, and the butler, Jacob. They tell Corrin that he is to train with his older brother, Xander, and they have prepared his training armor. Corrin says he wishes he could have finished the dream he was having, and Jacob asks on this dream. Corrin explains that the scene he saw at the battlefield, and Flora is quick to change the subject, with Felicia wishing him luck on the training. Corrin spars with Xander as Leo watches on. Xander taunts Corrin and tells him to pick up their sword and try again. He loosens slightly and says if Corrin is unable to land a single strike on Xander, then their father may not permit Corrin to leave the northern fortress, which motivates Corrin in this glorified tutorial 2.0. During the fight, Xander teaches Corrin about the use of dragon veins. powerful wells of energy that those of royal blood can make use of to alter the terrain to their advantage. Here, Xander shows Corn how to use it to create a field with healing properties. At the end of the fight, Xander compliments Corn's fighting ability, saying he's getting stronger every day, and that he could someday be the strongest fighter in all of Nohr. He also says that it could bring light to their kingdom, which for so long has been shrouded in such darkness. This will be brought up later again in the birthright part, but I did want to mention it here. Here we also see that Leo is rather competitive. As soon as Corn gets praised, he comes in with a jab, knowing more than just swordplay. Now, I will mention here, there is a pretty cute brotherly moment here between Corn and Leo, when Corn tells Leo that his collar is inside out, which flusters him immediately. And here we also meet up with the final members of the royal siblings, Camilla and Elise. Camilla dotes on Corn, wondering if he was hurt during the training, and Elise is a spark of joy and insisting she was worried about Corn too. I'll go over my deep thoughts about these characters as they become playable in the story, so we don't have to 5 back-to-back bios. Now, Elise here is a little much for the young anime girl younger sister archetype, and while this usually can be a bit much, having knowledge that Corn has been locked away in this northern fortress a la Princess Fiona, I can let it slide for a little bit. The family banter continues as Corn thanks them for being so patient with him since he's lost his memory. And Camilla tells Corn the good news that Father has requested his presence back at the capital. Here, they made up with Lilith, a young woman who will tend to their horses as they head back to the capital city. Xander and Camilla both dote on Corn, about how much he loves animals, even talking about a time where he nursed an injured bird back to health. A fact which makes Lilith noticeably uncomfortable. Elise is quick for an explanation by saying she's sad she won't have Corn all to herself anymore. Okay, I know I said I'd let it slide, but now I have reached my doting on Corn limit, so anything past this point is going to be given a sigh when it reaches that level. Gunter and Flora had Jacob stay behind to watch the fortress and the group as they head off toward the visit the king. Important note, if your Corn is female, then Felicia and Flora will stay behind, and Jacob will accompany you to the capital city. We zoom into the capital city, which is buried in this huge crater, and I have to say the scale and design of this castle is impressive. Here we meet with King Garen, and oh boy, we get to talk about him next.
Garen!
Garen's the bad guy, and it's not a secret the game wants to keep from you at literally any point whatsoever. He's what you get if you took Ganondorf from the Legend of Zelda series and turned him into a Fire Emblem character. He's even one letter off in the name. There's nothing redeemable about this man, and I hope you enjoy seeing this supervillain as your father figure if you choose Conquest. Because, whoo boy, this guy makes the moral dilemma a moral dumb-lemma. However, I will say there is artwork of him when he was younger from the Fire Emblem Cypher card game, where his hair more closely resembled Xander's, and I gotta say, this is a design improvement. I just wish it was in the games at any point whatsoever. Anyway, we meet with Garen at Castle Krakenberg, and Corn is happy to see his father so long after his imprisonment, rehabilitation. Garen immediately kills any kindness within a 50-yard space by saying it's about time for Corn to be used as a weapon to further strengthen Nohr's hold over the world. Yeah, Dad, what a well-adjusted thing to say. Meanwhile, all of Corn's siblings here don't bat a single eye at this. They just kind of ignore that part and instead voice concern for Corn's well-being outside of the castle. Here, Corn reveals to the player that he is aware of Nohr's war with Hoshido, and Garen reveals that they are descendants of the ancient gods, the first dragons. We'll talk more on these guys later, but it is with this power that gives them the ability to connect with the dragon veins, and they possess strength mightier than normal soldiers. Garen admits that Corn had been training well, but he'll need to have a suitable weapon to prove himself, and he gives Corn a gift of a sword that emits a totally not suspicious dark aura named Ganglari. Garen reveals it's imbued with magic from another world, and put it to proper use, he brings in some Hoshidan prisoners for Corn to execute on the spot. Classy. Here we bring in some obviously important characters, note such by their colored hair and more than basic design. Here we begin the fight and can see there are multiple enemies to contend with. One of the prisoners introduces themselves as Rinka of the Flame Tribe, and the green-haired ninja named Kaze recognizes Corn's name on his introduction. saying that he's of Hoshido, and then challenges Corrin to true combat. So, here's a normal sort of fight that we should be used to, with the last 2 chapters under our belt, but take care to not your units get into undue situations. But we do have some new faces to meet, so first comes...
Gunter!
Gunter here is a traditional Fire Emblem archetype known as Jagan, named after the first of his kind, Jagan, from Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. I tend to not like using Jagans in gameplay because they are the equivalent of using training wheels. They are a higher class unit, and so they earn less experience per kill in these early chapters. Due to their strength in the early game, they can end up being experience sponges. The worst part is, by the time your other units end up catching up to Jagans in level, the Jagan is so much worse by comparison, so they fall off hard. It does not help that Gunter's growths are pitiful, having nothing over 35%, which is his health. Yikes. I'll be honest, Jagans are typically some of the more boring characters in the story, and while Gunter has some things to differentiate with other Jagans, I really don't like those differences, and we'll talk about those much later. Now on some more positive news, we have...
Felicia!
She is the younger twin sister of the maid duo, and she is one of the most helpful units in the game. The maid class does not class change, unlike most other classes in the game, meaning she will remain a maid until the end of the game, unless you use a second tool to manually change her class. But the upside of this is her level cap is 40 instead of 20. Felicia's personality quirk is that she's devoted to aiding and assisting Corrin, but she is endlessly clumsy, often making a mess of the situation that she intends to fix. It's a little tropey, but kind of a fun light in the darkness that is the Nohr cast. Otherwise, stat-wise, she starts out pretty frail. She's not going to be doing large damage out of the gate, but instead her boons come in her speed and her weapon type, the Shuriken. So, Shurikens in this game are nuts. Typically, ninjas like Kaze make the most of them, but Felicia and Jacob like her can also make the use of the fact that those who use Shurikens can attack both at range and at close quarters. But also, they get to place debuffs on their opponent after they are done fighting, thus explaining their low damage output. They're really good for getting chip damage in and weakening the enemy for your stronger units to finish them off. This is really cool to take advantage of. This is also really annoying to have taken advantage of you, and oh boy, just you wait. Felicia also has the benefit of being a healer, so she can serve more than a single purpose, and healing is super helpful in early game Fire Emblem. Anyway, we are able to take out the prisoners with no effort expended at all. I'll be going over Jacob when he becomes next available for us to recruit, as we have been going for quite a bit on character bios here. After the fight, we corner Kaze and Rinka as they prepare to meet their end. Garen calls for their immediate deaths, something Corrin isn't prepared to follow, as killing faceless people is no problem whatsoever, but slap a hue of color into that hair and give him a name and bam, now he has morals. I understand the other prisoners are here in the background, but we don't ever add these folks to our army, so it's just a funny bit. Anyway, Corrin questions his orders, and asks a pretty reasonable question if they need to kill them. Garen gets real aggro and questions Corrin's questioning of him. We further question his questioning of our questioning, and Corrin decides to grow a backbone for the first time, and perhaps only time in this game, by refusing to kill them. Garen mutters a curse and uses magic to kill the nameless prisoners. Quick note, Garen's class and gameplay does not allow him to use magic, so that's fun. He could just use magic for the fun of it. Garen aims to burninate Kaze, and Corrin steps in the mix to block the attack. Everyone is shocked that such an act would be defied, and so Garen commands Xander to do the job and kill them, and also anyone who'd get in his way as well. Xander agrees, but he doesn't like it, telling Corrin to stand down. Corrin doesn't back down, and he fights back against Xander, who lands a critical blow against Corrin, telling him that the Hoshidans are the enemy. The rest of his siblings watch in horror as the brothers fight each other, the least tense music playing possible. When Leo takes it upon himself to rid of the prisoners, using his own magic. He asks Garen to be merciful in his punishment with Corrin. Garen skulks off and says he'll consider it later. Corrin approaches Leo and begins to scold him for killing the prisoners who are already beaten. Leo, however, lets on that he didn't kill them, simply doing enough to knock him unconscious. Xander makes it clear that one day, Corrin's kindness will be his greatest folly. Leo says he only did enough so that Elise and Camilla wouldn't get on his case when he irritates Corrin. Camilla then says that what happens next will be interesting, as Father never forgets a slight, no matter how small. Outside of the throne room, Xander tells the prisoners that it's only due to Corrin's voice that they still live, and they should disappear into the night and not be seen by the king. Kaze is silent, staring straight at Corrin through all of this, before they leave. After some time, Corrin and Elise meet at the entrance to the throne room. Elise says that she'll help plead Corrin's case as much as she can as they await his punishment. Interestingly enough, before they open the door, they hear Garen laughing, as if he were speaking with someone, but upon knocking, he gets serious real quick and allows them entry. Garen states that because Corrin directly disobeyed a direct order in normal circumstances, he would not be alive still. But since he is his kid, he decided to be benevolent and give him some leeway. Pending the outcome of a new mission, he is putting Corrin in charge of. If he is able to successfully complete it, then his past transgression will be forgiven. Corrin, eager to get back in good graces, accepts. The mission is to travel to the fort near the Hoshidan border, and confirm if it remains serviceable. Corrin meets with his siblings, who all state uneasiness over the mission, as they say Garen is not normally so forgiving, if that's what you want to call it. But Corrin is confident about getting it done quickly, especially as there's no combat involved. Camilla, ever so doting on Corrin, insists that she'll come along, an idea that is shot down by Garen's head inquisitor, Iago. This slithering snake of a man informs Camilla that not anything like that will be allowed, as this mission is a test for Corrin to prove his loyalty, and it's up for him to coordinate the mission, and for Corrin to be able to do that, his siblings cannot interfere. Garen arrives, saying that he won't be traveling by himself though, as he has appointed a man named Hans to Corrin's leech. Xander whispers to Corrin to be wary of Hans, as he's a criminal, a murderer that Xander himself arrested years ago, and that while Garen seems to think he's rehabilitated, Xander isn't so sure. He does say that he's a formidable soldier, so he shouldn't worry about being ambushed with Hans around. Corrin then travels to the edge of the northern side of the bottomless canyon that separates Nohr from Hoshido. Corrin questions the nature of the pit, and Gunter answers that those who fall are never seen again, thus the name. Upon coming closer to the fort, we see it's not as abandoned as previously mentioned. The Hoshidans bark at us to fall back, lest we violate the border treaty that's currently in place. And as we're about to retreat to formulate a new plan, Hans says fuck the plan and goes headfirst to paint the fortress red with Hoshidan blood. Corrin scolds Hans, saying that they aren't sent here for a combat mission. And Hans says a pretty revealing line in "Speak for yourself." We all see what's going on here, right? Good. Anyway, we begin combat. This battle's pretty simple again, just rout the enemies, but this time try to avoid Hans from stealing all the kills and hoarding all that precious EXP. Funnily enough, for me he died to this first enemy he went up against. He isn't too perturbed though, saying that he's done enough damage for the time being. Here, we also learn about Pair Up, the balanced version of the mechanic that was first introduced in Fire Emblem Awakening, where units can pair to act as one. Here, there is a gauge that builds up that can have the paired unit shield the other from an attack, but you don't get to choose which attack, it's whichever one would activate next when the gauge is full. There are also combat bonus in the minor damage that paired up units can deal with each other to add some more kick to the combat. Units that are paired up with one another will also build support points together, of which these can lead to various support conversations. They're sort of like Persona's social ranks. Characters can support with a large number of other characters and have unique scenes that play out. I won't be detailing every single support scene, because while I am a masochist, I am not mad. I will, however, be touching on the support conversations that I experience in my playthroughs, but these will not be available for a bit. Corrin breathes a sigh of relief having lived the conflict, but he's feeling uncomfortable at the way this ended. He at least accomplished the mission, but suddenly a second wave of Hoshidans arrive on the scene. Heading the pack is a red-haired man named Saizo. Xander comes in to defend against this assassination attempt, and so comes Leo, Camilla, and Elise. Camilla takes care of Saizo's two soldiers and forces his retreat. A second ninja, Kagura, appears asking Saizo's condition. claiming the Crown Prince Ryoma is right behind her. With this news, Xander has Gunter lead Corrin back to safety, while he fends off the ninjas. On the bridge on the other side of the bottomless pit, Corrin looks around for Felicia, noting her disappearance. Suddenly Hans appears, and he aims to kill. He attacks Gunter, and the weight of him and his horse and the force of the attack send Gunter tumbling down toward the bottomless pit. Hans moves to attack Corrin in much the same way, but Corrin fights back, his hand suddenly transforming, and then launching into a flurry of attacks, parts of his body turning monster-like. He's able to send Hans back, and Corrin questions his motives, where he reveals the obvious twist here. He was working under King Garen's orders. He leaves to run, and as Corrin is about to give chase, he senses a powerful force erupting from the Ganglari, and it throws Corrin into the bottomless pit. A mysterious light follows after him, and we cut to Corrin following when Lilith, of all people, manages to save us, transforming into a small dragon and sweeping us in her grasp. Lilith reveals that she knew this day would come eventually, but yes, she is not human. And then she reveals that he's seen this form before, as the strange bird Corrin had tended to the past was in fact Lilith as she is now. It was a kind act that likened her to help her serve him, and she's been working at his side ever since. Unfortunately, the power she expanded to save him used up all the energy she used normally to inhabit her human form, so she would now have to remain in this form. The pair are struck down by a stray lightning bolt, and Lilith uses the remainder of her power to transport them to the astral plane. For fun reference, the world she brings us to exists within the small gem she holds onto. And why this gem appears here now? Reasons. Anyway, Lilith explains that the astral plane exists parallel to the world he lives in normally, and their entrance there was granted by one of the first dragons themselves. As such, time and space operate differently here in this realm, and currently, they're alone. Corrin spends enough time to heal his wounds from the fight, and then he goes to talk to Lilith more about the area. But Lilith explains that there exists more business in the other world, to which Corrin agrees. She explains that once they return, they will be back at the space that they entered the astral plane from. Corrin prepares himself for a potential ambush, looking for his siblings, but shocker, he's ambushed from behind and passes out. We awaken in a valley settlement far off the depths in the Hoshidan territory. Rinka, the prisoner we had let escape previously, is there to greet us with a pot of boiling stew. She explains that Corrin's been taken to a Flame Tribe territory within the Hoshidan border, and it's Rinka's plan to turn him into the Hoshidan authorities. Corrin is ready to accept his fate, thinking they're going to want his head for the unprovoked attack at the border, but Rinka, knowing more in the current moment, says he shouldn't worry. She doesn't think they'll take to those lengths given the circumstances at hand, but doesn't explain further. They meet up with Kaze once more, and he immediately kneels for Corrin, telling him that he's so glad they found him, calling him Prince. Corrin is understandably confused, and the statement's gonna echo throughout this entire game, I swear. Kaze says if he accompanies him back to the Hoshidan capital, they can explain more there, to which Corrin goes along with. I mean, it's not like he had any other plans. At the Hoshidan Royal Palace, Corrin is brought forth before the Crown Prince Ryoma. Corrin believes he's being brought for his execution and offers himself without a fight, all but confusing Ryoma and the others around him. But then suddenly a woman in all white appears before Corrin. This is Mikoto, the current queen of Hoshido. And she rushes Corrin in a full embrace, thanking the blessings that her sweet child has returned to her. Corrin is understandably confused, saying that there's no way this woman is his mother, as he was raised in Nohr. Mikoto explains the sad tale of Corrin's abduction and upbringing by the Nohrian forces. Ryoma backs up the queen's words, saying that he is in fact Corrin's oldest brother, and to Corrin's protests, the Nohrian royals are his siblings. Ryoma relays the story of that day that Corrin was abducted. In those days, the war was not yet on the path that it was now, but there definitely was tension between the two nations. The war itself hadn't broken out until King Garen had laid a trap for Ryoma's father, King Sumeragi, in the city of Shev. Ryoma explains that Garen had set up the meeting for the purpose of a peace conference, because this man is the kind of face that offers up the idea of a peace conference. Anyway, Sumeragi attends the conference in Shev, and it was there where Sumeragi was killed and Korn abducted. Now, why did Sumeragi bring his youngest child with him to a peace conference? Reasons? Korn says this can't be true, but when he tries to pull up the deepest memories, he can see the most blurry of images, which very much does look like the scenes Ryoma and Makoto have been talking about. Before they're able to speak much further on things, a messenger appears for Ryoma, saying that they're under attack in the north. Ryoma panics, saying that Hinoka and Sakura are in the area now, and they must hurry to prevent them from falling into harm's way. Ryoma bids for Korn to come and to see the truth with his own eyes. We then shift to the northern camp that is being raided, and we meet two of the Hoshidan royal sisters, Sakura the cleric and Hinoka the Pegasus Knight. I'm gonna save their bios again for when they become playable, as we're gonna have quite a lot of bios in this video and in the next chapter. That stands true. Speaking of, first we have
Kaze!
the Verdant Ninja. Now, I may just be dumb, but I played each of these games once, and Birthright I played through twice, once in English and once in Japanese, and I totally forgot that Kaze and Saizo are twin brothers. Okay, listen, I know fraternal twins exist, and I know it's an anime art style where you can stretch the truth on familial resemblances. But, I mean, come on. Anyway, Kaze is a ninja for the Hoshidan royal family alongside his brother Saizo, and carries an immense loyalty for Korn for reasons unknown. All in all, I like Kaze as a character, and I know this might constitute a spoiler, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I've seen many fall prey to this trap. If you like Kaze, and you wish to keep him on your team in Fire Emblem Fates Birthright specifically, make sure that you get his and Korn's support rank to A before Chapter 15. Now, I won't say why, but this only concerns you if you're going to be playing the Birthright path, as Kaze is available in each path no matter what. But this A rank requirement only exists in Birthright. Kaze as a unit is another unit that is highly recommended by me. His growths highlight his strengths, as this man has a 45% strength base with 65% skill and 85% in speed. And while his defense base is low, he does have a respectable 50% growth rate per resistance. These all add up for a character who does what Felicia does combat-wise, but better in nearly every way at the cost of the healing capability. Although it is important that, since Kaze is a ninja and not a maid, oh my, the possibilities are endless. Do your thing here, internet. But he is able to cast change into a master ninja once he gets to level 10. Everything I said before about Felicia and her ability to debuff the opponents is also true for Kaze, and he employs it even more effectively. One last thing on Kaze, like Gunter representing one Fire Emblem archetype, Kaze also represents one half of another archetype, being the Christmas Cavaliers. Now, this might be a little confusing since Kaze is not Christmas, nor is Kaze a Cavalier, but the term comes from a pair of Cavaliers who usually are in your starting lineup at the beginning of Fire Emblem games, one typically being green and the other typically being red, starting with Cain and Abel all the way back in Shadow Dragon. Now, Fates did decide to mix up the formula a bit, and instead of Christmas Cavaliers gave us Christmas Ninjas, with Kaze and Saizo. It is to be noted that you only obtain both Christmas Cavaliers in Birthright and Revelation, because in Conquest only Kaze joins you of the pair. Now, with that glowing review out of the way, next up we have an even more glowing review.
The Lobster Lord himself, High Prince Ryoma.
Now, Ryoma isn't playable per se in this chapter. He's an ally unit, which means he acts according to the NPC AI. But I have wanted to talk about Ryoma for a little bit, and I want to be able to do so in this video. There are a few things about Fire Emblem Fates I consider near perfect, and that I will defend until the day I die. Ryoma is one of those things. Kick-ass sharp design, voiced by Matt Mercer, the best character in Fire Emblem Warriors, and easily the best character in this entire game. Ryoma is a cool character, and not getting to use him is the hardest part of any Conquest file. Him being literally perfect is a character moment that comes up in other characters' arcs, so it's not just my opinion stating such. This man was meant to be the golden boy. Now in gameplay, holy shit. So he comes to us in this chapter as a level 1 Swordmaster, which is the ascended class of the Myrmidon. And you might think that he's a Jagan like Gunter is. Oh, no, you sweet summer child. This man is no Jagan. He is a prologue of what is to come. He is reckoning incarnate. See, Ryoma's in this chapter, but then he won't be playable for a little bit until the Birthright and Revelation paths. Here, you get a taste of God, and then you realize you want more, nay, need more to survive. Ryoma's growths are strong in favor of strength, speed, skill, and luck. Meaning, he's going to be hitting fast, and he's going to be hitting hard. And while he's doing both of those things, he's going to be activating his skill Astra, which allows him to perform 5 hits for each action. Each of them with their own separate chance to land a critical hit. And you might look at these growths and say, well, shoot, his defenses aren't so hot, maybe he's just a glass cannon. Vantage. Oh, what was that? You haven't heard of Vantage? Well, it's this little skill Ryoma has that just so happens to make it so anytime he's below 50% health, and he's targeted for an attack, he goes first. Enemy wants to take that killing blow, they'll have to survive Ryoma's lightning fury of attacks to even try. And if they manage to survive, Ryoma's skill is so high that you better pick a god and pray to actually hit him, because his other skill raises his avoid by 10 points. Okay, well that's all good and all, but he does only have a sword with him. Magic users and archers can pick him off from a distance. Wait. Let me clean my glasses real quick. It says here that Ryoma's sword can shoot thunderbolts at a distance, and it gives him +4 strength for the hell of it? Ryoma is our lobster lord. This is his world, and we are just living in it at his discretion. And also, since we pointed out that killer cipher artwork, I want to show you this one piece of art with Ryoma, where he's been chibified. Now you have seen true perfection. Alright, now all good things come to an end, as our final character bio for this chapter is for a real stinker. Here comes
Rinka.
So, as a character in the story, I think she's pretty neat. She's the only representative of the Fire Tribe that we see in the entire game, and she's also the only one who's playable. She's got the unique factor. It's just a shame that she's so uniquely bad as a unit. So, Rinka is an Oni savage. One thing of note is the Hoshidan classes tend to be versions of traditional Fire Emblem classes, given a more Japanese coat of paint. Traditionally, she is an axe fighter, along the likes of Barst or Boyd. These kinds of characters excel at having high HP, massive attack stats, with not the greatest amount of skill or speed. They're high-risk, high-reward characters, and Rinka just doesn't have that. Her growths are really confusing for an Oni Savage, and for any class, really. 45% is the highest modifier she can get for her strength growth, and as an Oni Savage, whose main purpose is to deal big damage, it's just sad. It's not like you can reclass her to make use of a hidden magic stat she's got waiting in the wings, because her magic growth is 25%. So based on her stats, she's pretty fast, which admittedly is helpful, and she does have good physical defense, but it just feels like someone on the dev team didn't like her and didn't think she deserved to have good stats. Now, with that said, clubs, her weapon type, do help a little bit to cover the difference in her garbage stats, as they do have high base damage, and her personal skill does help cover this difference as well by giving her +4 strength when she's not at max health. But it just feels like these are wasting opportunities to cover a very obvious and glaring weakness, rather than building off of her strengths. I'm gonna be honest, I've never used her that seriously because she's never performed well for me in the long term. But I will be attempting to use her this file. I will say though, as it's a bit of a pick-me-up, Rinka has unique animations tied to her attacks that add extra fire effects due to her association of being part of the Flame Tribe, and that's really cool. Felicia and Flora both have similar properties to them with their attacks having ice particles in their animations, because they're part of the Ice Tribe. Now, with all the bios done, we're going to get to the battle proper. This chapter teaches us about visiting villages for loot, as well as monstrous creatures that roam the realm dubbed the Faceless. These are monsters created by dark magic spawned from Nohr to attack Hoshidan settlements, and they stand in as generic mooks for us to take down and eliminate guilt-free. The goal here for this chapter is to use the dragon veins efficiently to melt the snow in ways that allow you to catch up to the Faceless before they're able to catch and kill Hinoka and Sakura. Once we're able to do so, we continue on. As we rescue the two sisters, they thank us for coming to their aid. Sakura asks Corrin their name, but Hinoka is quick to answer, getting extremely emotional at their reunion. Ryoma states that Hinoka was extremely fond of Corrin when they were younger, so his kidnapping devastated her, saying that after they were taken she cried for months, and then one day she simply stopped crying and picked up the Naginata, vowing to train someday to bring them back. Ryoma explains that they should head back before more Faceless arrive, explaining to Corrin their origins from Nohrian black magic. Hinoka explains that Nohrians can only assault Hoshidans on the front lines because of the magical barrier that Queen Makoto placed around the kingdom that prevents entry from Nohrian intruders. As upon entry they suddenly lose their will to fight, and so Nohr sends the Faceless as they have no individual will or souls of their own. Corrin is shocked at this fact, saying that Nohrians would never send brutes like that to terrorize other people. Really, Corrin? This lovable mug wouldn't send mindless monsters to terrorize others? Okay. Alright. Heading back to the capital, Corrin meets with Makoto. He's still reeling as the conflict in his heart over these new revelations have come as major surprises to him. She shows him the room that he used to stay in when he was here, even an old drawing that he made when he was a little boy. Corrin says he's afraid he still doesn't remember anything of his past in Hoshido. He tells Makoto he believes he could be her child, but he feels difficult emotions when listening to their stories. Everyone in Hoshido feels like a stranger to him. And she's understanding, saying that she knows that while living in Nohr, he must have been so sheltered. And yep, being locked away in a fortress for a majority of your life will do that to ya. Makoto says that she hopes one day they can be a family once more, and then allows Corrin to free roam of the kingdom.
Yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to plow.
Corrin introduces himself to the woman, Azura, and she's got lost in her singing. And here we learn a juicy tidbit. She is a former princess of Nohr. Oh ho ho ho! Now what do we have here? Now we're getting to the hypocrite territory, aren't we? Just as Nohr stole away a Hoshidan prince, Hoshido stole away a Nohrian princess. Corrin is understandably confused, as he asks how that could be. As if it were true, then he would have heard of her, since he grew up with the Nohrian royal family. Azura explains that she's been in Hoshido for almost as long as Corrin's been in Nohr. After Corrin was kidnapped, the Hoshidans tried again and again to retaliate, and while most of their structures were heavily guarded, Azura was not. A Hoshidan ninja was able to steal her away in the dead of night. However, just as Corrin was satisfied with his life in Nohr, for however short it may have been to look at the end, seriously man, it's very clear your days were numbered, and that number was quickly approaching 0. But Azura says she's lived a happy life in Hoshido, as while she's technically a hostage, she isn't a prisoner, and the people of Hoshido have been accepting of her. The queen even accepted her as a daughter of her own. Word of the queen resurfaces those feelings Corrin had been feeling earlier, and he's conflicted, saying she seems nice enough, but he can't force feelings for someone he doesn't know. Azura says she understands how he feels, and if she were to return to Nohr, she feels like she'd be thinking the same things. But she does say that if she had a choice, she would prefer to stay in Hoshido. I wonder why. Corrin says he doesn't know what he's going to do next, but he needs time to think on his feelings on the matter. We begin in the Hoshidan throne room as Corrin meets with Mikoto once more. A few days have passed since the reunion of a long-lost prince and his family, and Corrin says that while he still has questions, he is feeling more at ease and has at least a few answers to satisfy him. Mikoto then requests Corrin to sit on the throne, to the surprise of Corrin. Mikoto explains that the throne is infused with the power of the first dragons, and it's said that those who sit on it regain their true form and mind. Corrin, assuming she means to say that he might be under some Nohrian spell, and questioning his trust, is quick to back away, though she is quick to reassure him that it has nothing to do with trust. She simply wants to see if it's possible that Corrin's earliest memories may have been sealed away by Nohrian magic, as if there's a chance that could help ease his difficulty in the current situation, she figured she would try. But she doesn't want to push him in a direction he doesn't feel comfortable with. Mikoto's attendant, Yukimura, arrives on the scene and tells the queen that the ceremony is about to begin. He is basically the Hoshidan version of Yago, except not comically evil. The rest of the Hoshidan siblings arrive for the ceremony, and Mikoto explains that she wishes to make a public announcement of Corrin's presence in the castle, as there have been rumors flying around of spies from Nohr infiltrating the castle. She wishes to dispel these rumors and boost morale for their victory of reclaiming Corrin. She then says that she's arranged for Takumi, Sakura, and Hinoka to give Corrin a tour around the city, and she also urges Azura to travel with them as well. The only one not pleased by the events is Takumi, the youngest brother of the royal line. He merely stares at Corrin without saying a word. Sakura, noticing the tension, pipes in and says she thinks Corrin will love it here. As they leave, Mikoto wishes Corrin acclimates easy enough. Yukimura says that his return must be a message from the gods, and Ryoma hopes that it's a good message, saying he feels uneasy about the invasion up north by the border. In the capital city, Shirasagi, we see the cherry blossoms are blooming, and the people everywhere are in full celebration mode. Stalls are jam-packed with vendors and happy customers. Corrin notes how friendly everyone is and how bright everything is, saying it's quite a contrast from the dark and dreary fortress he grew up in. Takumi comes in to rain on the parade, telling Corrin to not get too comfortable, saying openly that he doesn't trust him, and egging him on to return to Nohr already. When Azura is surprised by his reaction, he scowls at her too, and asks her what right she has calling him by his name, as she's just as untrustworthy. Corrin calls Takumi on his bullshit, saying that Azura's been in Hoshido as long as he's been gone. Shouldn't that be good enough to consider her part of the family? Takumi says he doesn't care, and just wanted to tell Corrin to his face that he shouldn't expect things to be all hunky-dory because he's back. Sakura apologizes for Takumi's rude comments, downplaying them as just as Takumi being Takumi. Corrin thanks Sakura for her kind words, and says he knows a girl around her age back in Nohr, and just as about to explain that it's his younger sister Elise, he's interrupted by the start of the ceremony. Corn transforms into an ancient dragon after witnessing the assassination firsthand. Now, here we are straight into the battle and we can go over some character bios.
Corn!
First and foremost is the second half of Corn's bio. Here we see that Corn is part dragon. That much was evident by the use of dragon veins, but it seems like there are more dragons to him than we originally thought. This is a unique spin on a protagonist, and being able to make use of it so soon in this game is pretty unique as well. Corn's dragon form greatly increases his stats, but he is limited to using the Draconic Rage weapon, which does limit his combat potential, as while he is stronger, he can't make follow-up attacks, so speed is nearly useless. Corn also does not rely on his strength stat when fighting as a dragon, but instead uses his magic stat, which his growths for magic isn't great, but the increased stats from being in the dragon form do help quite a bit. Corn doesn't get any new skills from entering dragon form, but it can definitely be helpful in navigating tough battles with the increased defenses and resistance. I do want to show off some of Corn's cipher artwork in this form because it is really good. Also of note, in official art and other media, male Corn is usually designed to be the Hoshidan prince, while female Corn is designed to be the Nohrian princess.
Azura!
And this is another character I like quite a bit. There are some story nitpicks that I have with her much later on, but overall I enjoy her as a character. She's a stoic princess who chooses to be so due to her relationship with both sides of the war, as she does not seem to fit in with either side as evidenced by Takemi's behavior and her previous bullying on the Nohr side. Still, she carries on and finds strength in the mysterious song that she's known for as long as she can remember, Lost in Thoughts All Alone. Funny thing is, the title is so close to the track that plays early on in the Ben Drowned ARG, Lost in My Thoughts, that I get the names confused sometimes. Now, Azura is a little bit like Felicia in gameplay in the sense that her class, Songstress, does not have an advanced form, meaning she'll continue leveling up until she hits the level cap at 40. And like Felicia, I think she's a fantastic unit to use in gameplay as well. You see, she wields lances for her weapon, which overall are really good, but she also has the ability to sing, a new form of the Fire Emblem archetype of dancing. Dancers, or singers in this context, allow other units to perform multiple actions in one turn. So she'll sacrifice her turn, so say Corn can perform twice in a turn. This is good for training her up at the start because she is pretty frail to begin with, and I do mean just to begin with, because hot damn, look at these growths! While she is leaving herself open to devastating attacks, with the low HP, defense, and resistance growths, it's absolutely nuts that she has such high growths for strength, skill, speed, and luck. These are monstrous numbers, and if you can overcome the initial risk, she will also become a monster. Her personal skill is also really good, Healing Deskcan. It allows for her to heal units that immediately surround her for 10% of their health at the start of every turn. It's also of note that later on she'll get a skill called Inspiring Song, which is, in addition to giving units another turn, will also give them stat buffs. A 3-point boost to speed, skill, and luck to any unit she sinks to for that turn. Azura does have cipher artwork I want to show off, but I'll wait until the design makes a bit more sense to do so. And finally for our showing today is Sakura, the youngest Hoshidan sibling. She's our main healer on the Hoshidan side, and in her base class, the Shrine Maiden, she has no combat potential. But as she class changes into a priestess, she gets the ability to use a Yumi, or a Hoshidan bow, which, I'm gonna say it, it's incredibly dumb that she was our second archer in Fire Emblem Warriors. I still stand by that to this day. I have lots of questions regarding the roster of this game, and Anyway, Sakura is shy and timid compared to Elise, who is bubbly and outgoing. She's easily intimidated, and she feels guilty at times for not standing up to the same heights as her siblings do, and who are all more confident in their beliefs. Her growths are pretty decent across the board. She has a strong magic growth, which translates into more health being healed at each opportunity, with low defenses and okay resistance growth. She's pretty default for what a cleric analog is to do, though her low strength growth, even in her ascended class, is pretty miserable for any combat options for her as it maxes out at 40%. With that said, we're going to continue on the fight, which has some notable new enemies that carry Worm Slayers. These are swords that do bonus damage against dragons, and Oh, now I see the problem. Your best bet for this chapter is tackling one side of the field before having the other, and having Corn shielded from those Wormslayer folks. Ryoma is an ally at the bottom of the map, so you'll want to reach him and the boss of the chapter before he dies. Funnily enough, Ryoma dodged every single attack from this boss on my first playthrough. Now, my challenge in this chapter was Rinka dying to the mage's onslaught because her resistance is equal to a single sheet of loose leaf paper. On this round, though, Ryoma did die, because of course he did, so... but thankfully, it doesn't really matter if Ryoma dies here, because all he does is retreat from battle since he's not playable. This does not affect us getting him later in the story.
Azura! No, stop!
Destined to see life beyond the shore, just out of reach. Let the waters a path is yours to climb. Kill me if you want, but do it as yourself.
Returning back to his true form, Corn exhausts the rest of his draconic energy, and before we continue, I'll have to say, there is a Fire Emblem Fates abridged set of videos that meme on this game's story, and the outro to that series is this one short clip here of Azura being grabbed, and I can't take this scene seriously because this is now all I think about. It's just so funny. Credits to Choops on YouTube. Anyway, Corn says he finally remembers. Wrong clip. Roll the real memory.
Fire it well. I'm disappointed in you, Sumeragi. That wasn't even my best trap. You poor thing. Orphaned at such a tender young age. You are my child now.
Corn remembers the truth behind his kidnapping, and he knows everything Mikoto and the others told him now is true. Corn says he's disgusted over his actions, over what he did to Azura. He says it was like he had no control over himself. Azura says it was the blood of the ancient dragon that runs in his veins. And Corrin is understandably confused, saying he thought only the Nohrian royal family had dragon blood. Ryoma explains that the blood of the dust dragon runs within the Nohrian royal family, while the Hoshidian lineage share the blood of the dawn dragon. He explains Corrin is special though, that he can actually take the shape of a dragon, a feat that none of the other siblings can perform. Now in truth, there are actually 12 original first dragons, each of a different element. Now, because Fates' lore is so hand-fisted, we only learn of a few of these original dragons in all 3 games. And this is never brought up in any other game in the series. Nice. The Dawn and Dust Dragons being 2 of them of Light and Darkness. However, 2 more we can assume are the dragon that Lilith called out to allow us access to the astral plane, as well as the ancestor of the Flame Tribe that Rinka belongs to. There are a few more we'll be able to assume as we move on, but don't think that the lore here is super extensive. However, the fact that there are 12 dragons at all is a nice reference to Fire Emblem genealogy of the Holy War and its 12 Crusaders. He then asks if Corn's sword was a kit from King Garen, and Corn begrudgingly agrees. Ryoma, understanding, says this whole event was set up by Garen himself, and Korn is not to blame himself. Korn is misunderstandably confused, wondering why Garen would do such an evil act. Takumi is understandably angry, saying Korn's apology means nothing. He then says that Korn must have known this had happened, and then disowns Korn as a brother. Korn apologizes, and says maybe it's better if he leaves to avoid causing any more duress. But Yukimura interrupts, saying that it's not what Mikoto would have wanted. He says that Mikoto foresaw her own death on this day. Somehow. And that Korn isn't to be blamed, but instead King Garen is. He then points them toward the statue in the center of the plaza. Embedded in the plinth is a sword, saying it's much like Ryoma's divine blade Raijinto and Takumi's divine bow Fujin Yumi, and it may only be wielded by a singular warrior, the one chosen by the blade to end this long conflict. Immediately, it flies into Korn's hands to Takumi's disbelief, choosing him as the rightful wielder of its power. Kaze appears, saying that a massive Nohrian force is gathered at the border, now that the magical barrier cast by Mikoto was faded with her death. Ryoma says that this act was the final straw. He had worked hard to avoid a full-out war, but now he intends to show the Nohrians what Hoshido was made of. I have to say, the song that kicks in at the discovery of the Outtro is really good. Anyway, Azura meets with Korn as Ryoma leads his siblings toward the battlefield. Korn is unsure if the war is the right answer to these acts, but Azura warns him that going near intense fights is possible he could lose control again and slip into the dragon form, and she may not be able to bring him back if left unchecked. This worries Korn, and he asks if there's anything he can do. And she smiles, saying that she can use this dragonstone that she has for reasons. Dragonstones are powerful artifacts that allow dragonkin to channel their energy and control their power at will, and Azura just has one. Sure, fine. Korn thanks Azura and tells her that he feels safe with her, that he wouldn't know what he would have done if she hadn't come to his aid. She thanks him in return, and tells him that she's going to accompany him to the battlefield. We open on familiar territory. Xander and Ryoma are met in the middle of the battlefield. Xander sees Korn across and is relieved, asking if he's okay. Korn replies he's fine, but asks why he's invading Hoshido. And if your guess was, because Daddy Garen said so, then you'd be right. Xander says if they can capture the throne now, they can avoid all the nasty bloodshed stuff. Ryoma bids Korn caution, saying that Xander's a Nohrian commander and is very dangerous. Then along come the other Nohrian royals, Camilla, Leo, and Elise.
This way.
Big brother! He's my brother!
We're your family.
Korn must now choose. This choice will dramatically alter the events moving forward and will dynamically change the relationships Korn has available to him for the rest of his adventure. Defend Hoshido, fight with Nohr, or refuse to take a side. 3 paths lie ahead of you. Which would you choose? For me, I'm going to be starting out with the path of Fire Emblem Fate's birthright, by choosing to fight alongside Hoshido and defend from the Nohrian invasion. That is where we will pick up next time as we recap the events end here today. I want to thank you all for checking out this video and for watching for so long. I have a lot of thoughts on the rest of this game and it only gets more in depth from here on out. If you like this content, I have other video retrospectives on my channel, a few Pokemon centered ones and a few more than not in my Explained series on the Somnium Files and its associated ARG. And I've also got a fan house available if you want to throw extra support my way in exchange for early looks at my manuscripts as I write them. Also, speaking of my books, the first 3 books of my series, 12 Monoliths, are now available on Audible officially. The links to these will be in the description, and you can follow me on Twitter or join my Discord for more news on my latest ventures. Check you guys next time.